Hello and welcome everybody. Today we are not going to talk about technique, we're not going to do a video analysis. Today it's about training and racing. The most important thing in a rowing race is to understand that it is neither endurance nor sprint. It's right, the main thing in between. It's something you cannot really prepare for, and at the same time you have to prepare for. It doesn't really matter if you are an endurance-based athlete or an explosive-based athlete. You will always suffer. The question is, do you also perform when you suffer? And in order to understand how to prepare for a rowing race the best, it doesn't really matter if it's a 1K or 2K, and these are the two distances I'm going to cover here the most. The principle is always the same. The idea I follow in my training plans is that you enter anaerobic threshold state as late as possible. And in order to understand why this is so important, you have to understand how the body produces energy and most importantly, which type of energy. Our muscles can primarily use only one source of energy, and it's called ATP. And if we didn't have ATP, it would be dead in 10 seconds. ATP is the only source of energy the muscles can use. Now the question is, how does the body produce ATP? The prime source is glucose. And there are two ways to turn glucose into ATP. There's a short way and a long way. The long way requires oxygen, and our bodies use the long way as long as we are in aerobic state. So this is usually quote unquote low intensity. And during that long process, 1 mole of glucose is turned into 32 to 36 moles of ATP, depending on which sources you trust. And that's the yield. Actually, the body produces a bit more, but it also loses a bit during the entire process. Now the short process is the process we'll use when you are in anaerobic threshold state. And anaerobic state is fermentation only, so it's without use of oxygen. The problem is that during that fermentation process, lactate accumulates in your body. Lactate is usually a byproduct of the longer ATP production cycle. And you see, I'm keeping it super simple here because I don't want this to be a super scientific video. This is meant to help you understand how to train for a rowing race and how to judge which way you set out for the rowing race. Should you do an early burst? Why 10, are 10 hard strokes in the middle of a race? Did it make sense or not? Lactate is a resource of energy only if we are in aerobic state. As the moment we reach anaerobic state, lactate starts to accumulate because it's not being reused, because the long ATP production cycle is essentially shut off and we only use fermentation. So that lactate accumulation will lead to quicker muscle fatigue in various ways, but essentially you will become tired much quicker and you will not feel very good. In a rowing race, you will always reach that state. The question is when, and the goal is to reach it as late as possible. So having a very hard early start, trying to lead halfway through the race at the cost of producing too much lactate because you reach anaerobic state too early will likely lead to devastating loss. There may be times where it makes sense and pays off because of a psychological advantage. But chances are you're racing against somebody who doesn't really bother about psychological advantage, because speed is speed. The thing is that you have to prepare your body, and now talk about how to prepare for a rowing race. You have to prepare your body in a way that it can still perform although it is in aerobic state. An under 23 lightweight athlete should be able to produce about 300 watts on a consistent basis, still being aerobic. For at least 20, 30, 40 minutes, possibly higher. My athletes were able to produce 320, 340 watts, still being around 2 millimole. 2 millimole refers to lactate we measure, and we usually estimate the anaerobic threshold to be around 4 millimole. Now the problem is that the anaerobic threshold state is anywhere between 3.5 to 7 millimole of lactate. So it's different from person to person, but also varies a bit day to day. So essentially, it is very difficult to know where your anaerobic threshold state actually is unless you use oxygen masks. But nobody has these available all the time. So the best way to make sure that you are in the most effective training zone for a larger fraction of time than anybody else is to have more variation. This is why we use 11 different training zones. Sometimes they might be difficult to target, but trust me, it pays off. Even if you're off target, even if you're like in a training zone too high or too low, eventually it will pay off. Ideally, when you do a race, when you're at the start of a race, it's like flying an airplane. You want to reach cruising altitude as quickly as possible, but you don't want to overreach it. You want to be exactly in cruising altitude and keep that altitude. You can later increase it over the second half of the race when you have enough fuel in the tank left that you know you can endure at least 500 or 1,000 meters if it's a 2K race in anaerobic threshold state. Ideally, you should not reach anaerobic threshold state before 1/4 of the race is over. For masters, I recommend to be aerobic for the first 400 meters of a race. This is also, and I'm going to close this video with this remark, this is also completely useless in my opinion in terms of energy. In terms of energy usage, it doesn't really make sense. You should never do 10 hard strokes within a race, because during these 10 hard strokes, you're very likely to enter anaerobic threshold state. And as you cannot go easy afterwards as well, you will accumulate a lot of lactate. And once you are in anaerobic threshold state, it is very difficult to get back into aerobic threshold state. I hope this video makes a couple things clear. If there are more questions, please let me know.
All right, hold it, not so quick. As I'm editing this, I found out that there are a couple of questions I get asked a lot, and in my car the last 2 days where I was editing this video, I just found like, okay, I got to tell you more about this. You know, audio quality is not 100 pro right now, but I just want to get the info out. So the first question I get a lot is, okay, how do you prepare for this? But as I said in the video before, you need a lot of alteration in your intensity zones. Having one intensity only for low steady state will not get the job done. So the variation is the key, because you never know if you actually hit the right zone. So as nobody really knows that, and if you talk to the scientists, says, yeah, you measured this, and yeah, I used to do this. Okay, I asked the scientist, you measure this and this, do you actually know that this is the right zone? And the answer then is, yes, but you always get that yes, but. So the solution for me was, all right, I just target all the zones from, 1 millimole up to 7 millimole. And even you can't measure lactate, you can target with watts and with heart rate, perceived load. There's so many ways. I have an athlete who does not have reliable heart rate. So we use watts and perceived load and occasional lactate tests. The second question is, how long does it take to prepare the body? So it usually takes 6 to 12 months, with some people 18 months. The next question I get a lot is it better to be explosive or endurance athlete? And my answer is, it doesn't matter, because in rowing you need both anyway. So if you come from the one extreme end and you're a super endurance athlete, you will probably never suffer, but the downside is you simply don't have the raw power to be explosive. And you need to be explosive every once in a while in a rowing race. If you're a super explosive athlete, it's awesome. You can sprint like hell, but you don't have the sustainability in terms of power. You drop too quickly. Your pace drops off too quickly. So the solution is, you need to handle explosive and endurance athletes differently, especially when we talk about recovery and so on. But I've made a different video about this. If you want to learn more about it, if you want to hear more about my opinion, then just let me know. Put it on rowing.zone. This is where I post all the videos and listen to all the comments. And so just let me know. All right, the next question is there a significant difference between 1K and 2K? Certainly there is. 1K is half as long as a 2K. So if you're a masters rower, you usually row a 1K and then you want to do a 2K. If you're not a super endurance athlete by nature, you're going to suffer over the second K, of course. So because your body's conditioned to do different things. But generally speaking, my estimate is always that there are people who train for 2K, so they do different volumes, so they're better prepared. The principle essentially is the same, because A 1K takes between 3 and 4 minutes. That's neither sprint nor endurance. And a 2K takes between 5.5 minutes, well, best time in the 8, up to 9 minutes, maybe 10, strong headwind, lightweight woman, single scull. It's neither sprint nor endurance. So it's the same category. It's just one is a little longer, one is a little shorter. But you're going to suffer anyway. Now, another question is it realistic to be in aerobic state for, you know, the first quarter, maybe 40% of the race? It is. When I said in this video, an under 23 lightweight male athlete should be able to do 320, 340 watts with 2 millimole. At 4 millimole, the averaged out anaerobic state or anaerobic threshold, you should be playing around at 380 watts. When I was a lightweight under 23, I had 383 watts anaerobic threshold, 4 mil on the erg. So, and I was not Olympic champion. So if you're an Olympic champion, it's very likely you should be there. So this is not unrealistic. How do you prepare for that? The ultimate question is, and why don't I just do race pace? And that's a really important question. I see a lot of training plans where people do steady state, low steady state at a stroke rate 23 and up. The thing is, if you always train high intensity, your body loses the capacity and the capability to produce anything that could be considered to be substantial pace at aerobic state. Because immediately you get to enter anaerobic state, boom, you're right there. You only produce 2 mole of ATP per mole of glucose, fermentation only. Of course you can handle that, but it will not make it sustainable. The downside is you produce so much lactate. After every race, you have to get rid of all that lactate. And chances are 101%, in my experience, that athletes and teams who do this never bother to have serious recovery sessions. So the lactate never gets out of your body, and the result is you're more likely to get injuries. You can't sleep at night. That's a very good indicator, because your body's still trying to get the lactate out of your system while you actually should be sleeping and have other recovery process going on. So intensity, and in this I also count things like I do 6K tests every 6 weeks, 2K tests every 4 weeks. That's completely, in my opinion, I don't want to offend anybody, but in my opinion, it's useless and brainless. It's like, I said this in a different video. You study French all the time. Amphetamine in low steady state, variation in winter between 1 to 4 mil. This is where you build the massive foundation. My athletes know that. So, and why would you do, in the midst of that period, a 2K test, which is all out intensity? I just want to try out, see how to, why? You have not prepared for that. Doesn't make any sense. So it's a waste of time. But the upside is, you know, people can say, you know, I don't want to call them coaches, but people can say, you know, look, I've done my job. The protocol says this and that and that. Does it make sense? No. Does it happen even up to national teams? Yeah, 100%. 100%. The thing is that most people don't bother building up athletes over a period of 1, 2, 3 years. But realistically, it's the time it takes. Of course, you can turn things around in 5 to 6 months, but it's not realistic for everybody. I've done projects like this. They have worked. The Zimbabwe junior men's double. So they joined me 5 months before the junior worlds. They were currently at C final level, and I had to get them to A final level, and it worked. It was the Junior Worlds Tokyo. I think the first time ever a Zimbabwe junior boat reached the A final. That was an awesome project, but these guys were crazy dedicated, and their coach was as well. So their on-water coach in South Africa where they train. These are exceptions. This is not the rule, and this is not standard. Most people I work with are you know, they are bound in their own affairs. So either they are part of the national team and they have obligations to meet, or they're masters athletes, want to be competitive. They got a family, got a business, got a job. You know, you don't have time forever. So it takes longer, and things can always go wrong. You know, you can break a bone, you can get an injury while cycling, you name it. You know what I'm talking about. All right, so consider it's going to take time. So I hope this video makes sense, and also my interruptive add-on. There's so much more to say about this. If you're really interested, I might be do a Zoom live, Facebook live, YouTube live, whatever it is. Just tell me. Go to rowing.zone, let me know what you think about this video, and let's start a discussion. All right, ladies and gents, let's rejoin the main video.
Go to rowing.zone to talk about this video and other videos I'm making. And if you want to work with us, go to rmtraining.com, check out the training plan options we have. All the best. See you in the next video.